All right, so just like Rails had something called like Rails new project name. Remember when we used to run like Rails new like blog or something like that? So just like we had Rails new blog, it had generated an entire Rails application for us. Facebook also created a brand new generator called Create React App. It's fairly well maintained. You can kind of see it's like there's a lot of people doing pull requests, a lot of people raising issues, a lot of people have liked it and forked it over, and it's still being like the most recent thing was a day ago, a month ago, 2 months ago. Nothing is terribly old with this. So this is the generator that we're going to be using to create a React app that configures everything for us together, so we don't need to worry about the configuration we did yesterday. Things like Mocha and ES6 and Babel and all that other garbage that we had to worry about yesterday. It all comes for free with this Create React app. Go through this documentation whenever you get a chance. But for us today, we're going to create a new React app for us. So first things first, I'm going to do npm install -g create React app. Now, the npm install, the -g stands for global, meaning that I'm going to, oh God, oh my gosh. What happened? Let's try this. Okay. All right. So I've globally installed npm create React app, and from there, let's just do create React app. Maybe we'll just do this button clicker. This button clicker. So you can kind of see in the background right over here. I don't know if you can see it, but the button clicker thing just came up. And just like the first time that you set up Rails, it's taking forever because it's going to load all of your things inside of it. Yesterday, we talked about that cute little comic. Oh boy, my npm package is here. You'll never see it more come to life than in this particular moment right now. So the reason why React is so fast and the reason why people are like, you want it to be instantaneous is because it comes with so much extra stuff that's loaded into your browser. So instead of taxing your server over and over again, it's installing 1,107 packages that will be deployed with your app whenever somebody loads the page. So whenever somebody loads your particular page, all of these npm modules, all of this JavaScript code is going to be shoved into their Chrome or whatever browser they're going to be using. So it's automatically just loaded. So it gives that feeling that it's happening in real time, even though it may or may not be happening in real time. You can kind of see like this is taking forever. There's 20,000 extra packages that it's doing. While we do that, I'm going to look at this little comic here, and it'll make more sense very soon. And it's still installing. Can I get the idea? I mean, it's still going. It's been like almost a minute, maybe 2 minutes now, where it's installing everything that it needs in order to get things linked up. And it's still going, it's still going, it's still going, and finally we're done, 2 or 3 minutes later. So let's cd into the button clicker, open this up in Sublime, and we'll shove this over here. And let's kind of see what we've got going on. So when you take a look at the left over here, we have this node modules. Whenever you run create React app, these are all the different node modules that your React app is going to need. Every single one of these libraries is required. And every single one of these libraries, instead of living on like an external server, lives right here. So all of the code for request lives right here under like lib request, and you can see this is all the code that happens underneath the hood for just this one file in this one tiny little dependency that you have. Create React app requires all of these different, like pretty much all of these right here. So that's why it's able to move so quickly, is because your browser is handling takes care of all of this JavaScript code, and it's all loaded in all at one time.
if you do have a slight, maybe you make a change to one of these files.
Do not make any changes to those files. Yeah, those are, you have to rely on.
There's no git diff type thing.
What's that?
There's no git diff.
There's a git diff, but I would not recommend changing these, because that basically means like I can overwrite the things that it depends on. Like you wouldn't overwrite a gem that you're going to be using. Similarly, I would not overwrite the node modules that you have here.
You don't need import export for those?
Nope. Everything is, node modules will take care of all of that for you. Underneath this public thing that we have right here is all the public facing assets. So you have things like your fab icon, which is the icon that you show in the top left-hand corner of every single page. So if you see like GitHub has this fab icon right here on the top left, it looks like this particular thing does not have a thing on the left-hand corner. If I go to google.com or something like that, you can kind of see the Google fab icon show up in the top left once this finishes loading. So for React, the fab icon is this little nucleus looking like thing. What else is there? Source is basically the main meat of our application, specifically index.js, index.html, which we're going to create, and index.css. These index.whatever, like HTML, CSS, and JS, those files are going to be loaded first and are going to be the entry points for our React app. The main entry point for our app is under this source folder under index.js, where we import React. We're going to import React DOM, and then we're also importing our entire application.js right here. So the import React on line 1 basically contains all of the core React library. So it's looking for import React. There's something called like a class called React from the React library. And that doesn't live anywhere fancy. It's just here under node modules, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere right there. There's somewhere inside of this particular node module, there's a React class that you're importing here. That's the core functionality behind React. Who knows what else that relies on, but probably all of this other stuff it's going to rely on. The second thing on line 2, it says import React DOM. That basically takes your code and actually renders it out to the page, like your HTML page. We're also relatively importing app on line 4, which is the file app.js, and we're saying we're going to load that whole thing into our index.js. This is our entry point for our app. Moving on to app.js. You might need to change your settings to JavaScript Babel to get all the colors to look correct. This is what basic React code looks like. So we are importing React, and specifically a library called component from React. We're importing the logo from logo SVG, which is right over here. This is like the logo for React. And I'm also bringing the CSS styling into this particular thing. At the bottom, I'm exporting default to class, saying that this class is able to be used in other places, specifically this index.js right over here. So inside of every single React component, this is what we're calling these particular things. So every single React component has a render function. The render function is an example of what's called JSX, or embedded JavaScript. So just like ERB is embedded Ruby, which is HTML with Ruby code inside of it, JSX, which is what we've got here, like these curly braces, and like it looks like HTML, but you have these little curly braces inside of here. It says, I'm going to import this logo right from line 2 right here on line 10. These curly braces means it's going to be, I'm embedding some sort of JavaScript code inside of my HTML. At the very beginning, you may, if you work in React after this, which is fairly likely, you may see some extensions that say JSX at the end. But basically what they found out was everybody is more or less going to need to have embedded JavaScript inside of these HTML things. So they got rid of the X and just everything is now embedded JavaScript. So let's make a quick app for ourselves. So first things, we're going to have an app that's going to have a button on a page, and that button is going to record how many times we've actually clicked that button. It's actually there's a a stupid game called Click This Cookie, Click That Cookie, or something like that. Oh, Cookie Clicker, there it is. And it's basically, you just click it as many times as possible, and the more that you click it, you get more and more like games and other things that come along with it. So our goal is to create something similar. We're going to create a little button on the page. The little button on the page is going to record how many times we actually just click it. So like I said, like I said yesterday, every single React class is going to have a render function, which is what gets shown out to the screen. And every single one is going to have what's also called a constructor function. Constructor is like the initialize. So let's kind of take a look what we've done here. So I've kept this render function exactly the same. And then over here, I have a constructor function. The constructor is the same thing as initialize. The constructor takes in some props, like so we call them parameters inside of Rails. Inside of React, they call it props. And I'm going to super the props up to component. So it's like if I have any properties, I'm going to first like take all the properties from the parent and bring it inside of here. Next, I have something called state. Now, state is going to be very important over the next 2 weeks. It's basically a hash that's held at each component. So this particular component called app has a state, which is kind of like, like params was kind of like a hash that you had whenever you were dealing with any sort of forms. Similarly here, this particular app has a component that has its own individual state. And we're going to set just the click count is equal to 0. So this is just a hash that's available on this particular component. Right. So let's see if we can just load this up. I think it's just npm start. Where is it? All right, so right now we have React. This is what the boilerplate, remember those like the yay, you're on Rails, like little cute logo. Similarly, now we have this React app right over here. The little logo on the top left corner is that fab icon found in the public folder that I was telling you about. So if you take a look under public, there's this little fab icon. This is the thing that's showing up in the top left-hand corner. It even has those little rounded edges like this picture has. And then over here, it brings in the icon. It's moving. This is just an SVG, which is just a section vector graph or something like that. I'm not sure what SVG stands for, but it's basically a picture that moves. And now all I see here is just welcome to React, and it says to get started, we're going to edit this and save to reload. So let's change a few things just to give ourselves a nice win. So instead of welcome to React, we're just going to see if this shows up on the screen. And I don't need to do anything. It's going to hot reload for me, and it just automatically updates. So we know that we can change the words right here, and it'll show up on the page. So instead of changing this to poop, I'll call this button clicker. And I'm going to get rid of all of this here. I probably don't need this to get started. Maybe I don't need this. Maybe I'll add a button on the screen and it says, I have been clicked X times. Not doing anything. All right. So I have that moving React logo right here. I have button clicker. This is the thing that changed. And I have been clicked X times. Now, when I click this, it actually doesn't do anything because it's just a button that says something at this particular point. Using JSX, I want to get rid of this X, and I want to return how many times it's been clicked. So maybe this.state.click count. So how do I interpolate? Like inside of embedded Ruby, it was like percentage equals like this. Inside of React, it's going to be these curly braces. So what do I need to replace X with in order to get this click count in its place?
Dollar sign.
It's not going to be a dollar sign.
Curly braces.
Curly braces.
Click count.
Click count. It's not as easy as just accessing click count. click count is saved to this.state.
Oh, so you can put this dot state.
And then what? So this.state gives me a hash. I want to get the click count specifically.
Brackets.
Nope. I could do brackets, but I'm just going to do dot.
Click count.
I have been clicked, and then it's going to interpolate this.state.click count, which is going to be 0. So if I take a look back over here, it changed very quickly, and it says I have been clicked 0 times. And right now it's not doing anything because it's just showing something on the screen. So we see that it's been clicked 0 times because that's what it says here. Let's just do hello, hello. So I'm just going to replace it with that, and it's going to say, if this page refreshes, it's going to say, I have been clicked hello, hello times. Right now, I'm just going to hard code this back to 0. I want to do this thing where it's every single time that I click on the actual button, it's going to update this.states.click count by 1. I just want to keep increasing it. So what we need is what's called an event handler. So on this button, I'm going to have a handler called onClick. Let's take a look at JavaScript React event handlers.
Can you name this dot state something other than this dot state?
Nope.
So
state is a protected thing. So there are different event handlers. So there's an onClick. There are what else is there? There's handleClick. There are. Is there a list? JavaScript React. There's an onClick. There's an onChange. There's an on focus loss. There's like all these different event handlers. The first one that we're going to deal with today is just called onClick. So basically, it's saying when somebody clicks on this particular button, I want you to do this particular thing. I'm going to execute this dot handle button click. So again, I have a button. It just says it's interpolating. I have been clicked this dot state dot click count times. So as of right now, it should just say 0. Whenever anybody clicks on it, I'm going to execute this particular bit of code. On this, which is this particular component, there's going to be a handle button click function that I'm going to create. So I'm just going to create that real fast. Handle button click. Maybe I'll just get something out to the page. I'll just do alert hi, just to get something out. We'll go back here, wait for it to refresh. You can kind of see it says I have been clicked 0 times. That's this.state.click count. And whenever I click on this, it's going to execute this bit of code. So when I on-click this, it's going to handle the button click. Handle the button click lives up here, and all it does is it alerts hi. It just shoots out something to the screen that says hi. Hi. And I click it again, it says hi. So I know that my event handler is working at this particular point.
Why is there a
That's a great question. So when you create custom methods for event handlers, you generally have an underscore in front of them. So it's kind of like if you were to create like an on fill or on focus lost or on change or something like that, if you're creating a custom method, just throw an underscore in the front so that it shows other writers that, hey, this is something that the author wrote, rather than this is something like constructor and render and things like that. Those are all protected, things that are given to you for free.
And what's the deal with the class names instead of just using class?
I don't understand what the question was.
On line 19.
Oh yeah.
Normally HTML just says class.
Mm-hmm. This is React. This is just React CSS code. So if you take a look under, I think index.csx. No, that's not it. I think, I'm not sure. It might be from React or component here. This is just the CSS that they're using at that particular point. Like they just call it class. They just call it class name rather than class.
It's synonymous.
Synonymous, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It finds it inside the CSS and then gives it styling. All right. So again, we have our very basic React app button clicker. I have been clicked 0 times, and whenever I click it, it's going to alert me right now. But that's not really what I want. I want to see the number go up every single time. And so I don't want to alert high every single time. I'm going to I want to reset the state. I want to update this click count from what it was to just to like that +1. So I'm going to do this dot set state click count. Going to be this dot state click count.
You went into like.
So I can.
I was thinking of a traditional counter.
Yeah. So this is the way that we overwrite the state. Like I cannot simply just go in and say this dot state click count. I can't. I'm unable to do that. Like we can try it and then we'll watch it blow up. But the proper syntactical way to overwrite the state is using this protected method called set state. So basically it's saying like I'm going to update something on the state hash that's given to us in this constructor. All I'm doing is I'm going to set the state. I'm going to say the click count is now equal to whatever it is +1. I'm just going to increase it. So let's see what we get. All right, so this loads up, and I'm going to click on this button, and nothing. Oh my gosh, even worse. This is something blows up. It says cannot read set state of undefined. When you take a look at this, what's happening is when you click on the button, it doesn't have a concept of an owner. It doesn't know what this is at this particular point. So I started off here inside the render. I knew what this was because I'm in the context of the app, and I'm going to do handle button click. Handle button click at this point is calling something called this, and it's kind of like I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do at this point. Like, what does this refer to? Does this refer to the button? Does this refer to the component? This is ambiguous at that point. For us over here, this is very, very specific because I'm within render, which is a protected thing under this app component. When I take a look inside of handle button click, this becomes ambiguous. I'm using this inside of here, and it becomes ambiguous. So what I need to do is bind this. I'm going to say this a lot today, and you're going to get very annoyed and very, very confused. Let's go back for one quick second. So when I'm inside of render, the word this is not ambiguous because render is a method, a function on every single React component. So when we talk about this, it extends all the way up to app component here. We know what the context of this is. When I create a custom thing, however, like this handle button click, it's no longer a protected function name like I have here. Because I'm using this inside of this custom method, this does not belong to anything. Like it's not, we don't know if it's going to be, we know that even though it lives inside this particular file, we don't know what this is anymore. Are we talking about this as the app? Are we talking about this as something else? So you need to bind this to it to give the context of what's going on. So let's try this one more time. It's going to refresh. All right, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to click this. It says I've been clicked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we finally got this to work right over here.
If you set up another function, excuse me, you set up another function that uses this dot some function, then it's going to refer at this point. It's going to refer back to the app.
Yep. That's why you need to bind this to it, so you know exactly what version you're talking, what this is at that particular point. So I'm going to go back to the nightclub example from yesterday. There are VIPs who are not us, and then there are regular people who are us. VIPs, they go inside the VIP rooms, and they have. All right, let's put it this way. I had the great fortune one time of working from Thanksgiving until New Year's on call 24/7 for Groupon. As a result of that, there were higher ups that basically said like, you know, Jonathan, we thank you for your time and like giving up all of your holiday season and like getting woken up at all hours of the night. We'd like to take you to Eric Lukowski's box at the United Center. So Eric Lukowski is a billionaire. He was one of the founders at Groupon. So I was given like the ability to go inside the box, and I had certain things that were available to me when I was in the box. So I had free alcohol and free food and free desserts and like free everything. It was really nice. It's something I'd recommend if you have the ability to try it once, to go try it. But other people, like when I went down into like the regular stands and I asked for popcorn, they were not allowed to give it to me because the context changed. When I'm sitting in the box and I ask for popcorn, they give me the popcorn because I'm in the context of the box. They will give me whatever I want because Eric Lukowski is a billionaire. He's paying for it. When I go down into like the regular stands to sit with like just people who didn't have the access to the box and I asked for popcorn, they said it'll be $10. I said, no, I'm at the box. They're like, no, you're within the context of the regular people now. You have to pay for it. And then, but the idea is like I should still be able to get free popcorn. That should be a method that's still available to me because I'm a billionaire's guest. I should be able to go. So that's the idea behind the binding of this. So I just showed them my ticket, which had like this little gold stamp on it that says like, oh, you're actually part of the box. Oh, sure, sir. Here's your popcorn. Like, because I have that little thing that binds me to the billionaire's box, I have access to other things that are available.
So what if this dot state is binding to this?
This is kind of like the context.
I'm just,
okay.
It's like
I'm going to pause for a quick second here and let people kind of digest this for a second. And if you ever get really stuck, just console log everything, this.state.
Why is there an underscore in front of that one?
Sure. So the question was, why is there an underscore in the front here? So to go back on Danny's question, handle button click is a custom method that you write on an event handler. So this onClick is the event handler, and you're basically saying when somebody hits this event, whenever somebody clicks this, I'm going to have them execute something called handle button click. Handle button click is a custom method that you write, so you have the underscore in the front. It's just a way to differentiate. It's a stylistic choice. It can work without this underscore in the front. That's totally okay. But it's basically saying when I have the underscore in the front, it's a custom thing that I wrote. That's all. So if you really ever get stuck, just console log what state is and see what we get. So I'm just going to click. I have been clicked one time. You can kind of see like this is the state every single time that you are, every single time that you click it. So we're going to pause for a second. So we've done a lot. We've gone through a lot of concepts. We've gone through create React app. We talked about all of these node modules. We talked about the public folder, the entry point, which is index.js, which renders app.js, which is this whole thing over here. We've talked about constructor being the initialize. We're going to super the props in from our parent. We're going to set the state, the initial state right away in the constructor. And we have this render that comes out on the screen. We talked about event handlers, which basically says when a certain event happens on the screen, I'm going to execute this particular bit of code. We talked about these curly braces inside of a JS file means that it's JSX, embedded JavaScript. It's basically I am executing JavaScript within HTML. If you take a look at the button below, we can kind of see that this is probably reusable. You know, like I might have more than one button on the screen. Like if I were to make 2 cookies or something like that on the screen. So because it's probably reusable, I want to move my code into its own individual component. So I'm going to grab all of this code and I'm going to put it inside of what's called like just basically another component. I'm going to create another file. Maybe I'll create a components folder. Right up here, I'm going to create a new file called a new folder. called button component. Inside of button component, I will create a new file called buttoncomponent.js. I'm going to grab all of this code here and basically move it from app.js into buttoncomponent.js. Some of this will look the same, and some of this will look a little bit different. All right, so on line 1, I have import React and component from the React library, which lives inside of node modules. Then I have my my button component, which is going to extend from component. Extends is basically inheriting. So there's a parent class called component. Remember when we were doing things with active record base or action controller, there was a parent class that had a whole bunch of extra functionality. We're creating our own custom class called button component that's going to inherit or extends from component. From there, I have my constructor and my render. So I have my props here, I have a handle button click, and I have a render. And it basically says I have been rendered this many times. At this particular point, I can get rid of a whole bunch of code from app.js. I can probably get rid of all of this. I can definitely get rid of all of this. And instead of this button right here, I can actually just bring in an entire button component. So now app.js is no longer in charge of all the buttons, but the individual, like, remember, it's single responsibility. This particular app right here, this particular button component class is in charge of all of the button components. Now, every single component has its own individual state. So this particular button component has its own individual state. This app component has its own individual state. Let's see if this will run. I'm going to tell you that it won't. I'll pause real quick. Can anyone see why this is not going to run?
Because you have to have some type of action on the button component, like some method on it.
Well, if you take a look at line 19, I do have an action for it. So basically, when somebody clicks on this button,
right, but it's not being said. Is that action being stated in the app class?
it doesn't need to be. Button component is in charge of that instead of app. Raymond, you were saying something on the left.
Are you saying what's wrong on the left file or the right file?
There's something wrong on the left file that will not allow me to render this to the screen.
Oh, it's rendering the class app.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Let's take a look over here. So it blows up on line 18 of app.js. It says button component is not defined. So I moved all of my code over to button component. I've exported default button component. I'm calling button component over here on line 18, but I'm not importing button component on the top. So I do need to import that. The bad and good part about Rails is that it requires everything for you, so you don't have to worry about it anymore, which is good, but it's also bad because you don't want one file to have access to another file if you don't need to, but most of the time you don't really need to worry about it. So I'm going to import the button component, this class, from components, button component, the folder, and then button component, the file. All right, and if I wait and it's import from mistake. All right, so let's see if this functionality remains the same. I've been clicked that many times. Okay, so everything is still working together. And the reason why I decided to move the button component from app.js into its own individual button component class is that now these components are reusable. I can create as many button components as I want on this page. And each one of those, if you go back over here, it's going to refresh. And I have a whole bunch of different button components on the screen. Each one of these button components has its own individual state. So I can click this one, and it's not going to update any of the other ones. I can click this one over here, it's 8 times, and it'll remember that this particular component has been clicked 8 times. This has been clicked 0 times, this has been clicked 3 times, so on and so forth. Each individual button component that I put on the screen has its own individual state. And that's powerful because like this, if you were to take care of this inside of Rails, you'd have to save this. Basically, when I click this, it's going to update it here. It's going to send a request to the database and then update it inside the database. And the next time through, I'm going to reread it here. JavaScript is handling all of the clicking, all of the saving of different click counts, and all of the states here on this particular app.
You said database.
What's that?
You said database.
I'm saying that if we were to do the same thing in Rails, we would have to save the number of times it was clicked inside the database, make a call to the database to get that number, go through all the model view controller again, and then you finally see it. It's a very small thing. It might take a second or two, but a second or two is way too long already, and you're putting extra stress on your database. By JavaScript handling it all up here, like you don't actually really need to worry about it. It'll just updates here, and later when we get to it, it's going to send a request to the database. But you don't need to like hit the database, wait, hit the database, wait, hit the database, wait. So now we have tons of buttons on the screen, but that's not very programmatic. We're going to use JavaScript real quick to iterate over all of these, and we'll just render those out to the screen. So above the render, we can do some calculations before the return. The return is the last thing that we need, and it comes back out to the screen. So maybe we'll create a buttons array. And maybe for let index equals 0.
So if you wanted to identify that specific button, you could just put like an ID on it.
We could put an ID on it, yep. So I'm just going to create 100, like instead of like copy and pasting button component a bunch of times over here, I'm just going to create a buttons array. I'm going to iterate through it 100 times, and I'm just going to push in a button component into this buttons right here. And at the bottom, I want to use the JavaScript interpolation by just doing buttons here. Maybe I'll add some spacing to make it look a little nicer. And when this page reloads, then we have 100 buttons show up on the screen. Each of them maintains their own individual state. You'll notice that I'm not updating all of them at once. I'm updating each individual one. If I click this 5 times, it's only going to update this one 5 or 6 times.
But those aren't really being saved anywhere.
They are not being saved anywhere right now. That is true. But the illusion is that they are being saved. And that is oftentimes what people are looking for. So in the end, like you cannot avoid saving data into a database, but you can alter when that happens. So when you do stuff inside of Rails, because you don't have access to stuff like the fake saving over here, you'd have to submit the form, wait for the request and response to come all the way through, and then come all the way back. The really nice websites that you use that have React on them, all you really need to do is like click it once and it says you're done. Like who knows if it's actually done right at that very second, but it's being serialized in the back. It's making an AJAX request in the back. It's saving to the database, and then at a later point it'll actually save. But for you as a user, all you care about is like when I hit submit and it says I'm done. Like you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm done. Like it's the developer's job at that point to say like when they actually click yes, like I'm going to submit my information, and they say you're good to go. Like it's my responsibility to make sure that data gets into my database. You can't get away from saving stuff into a database.
So is there a Ruby equivalent for? There probably isn't then for this or bind.
Nope,
Okay.
There's not. Yeah, that one is JavaScript and React specific. Okay. You have a few challenges for today. All of the things that I went over is right here inside of your curriculum. I did actually write this whole portion. So hopefully you can follow it and be successful at it. You have 5 challenges for today. 4. Create React app, detention, palindrome, and state abbreviator. So we'll take a look through each one just so we have an idea of where we're going. So create React app, the first one is basically just to get you to create your first React app. We're going to install it. We're going to use a scaffold. We're going to have something called click count, and this button has been clicked X number of times. Essentially, it's just the curriculum that we just did. Just walk through it, make sure you understand as much as you can. If you don't understand this, which I guarantee you won't, make sure you call me over and we can just keep drilling it until it becomes second nature to you. Second one is called detention. You're basically going to print something 100 times instead of writing it 100 times, you're going to have React do it for you 100 times. Palindromes is basically you're going to have a little text box that's going to tell you whether or not the word that you type is a palindrome or not. You don't need to hit submit or anything like that. It's basically the moment you enter the letters, they're going to tell you whether or not it's going to be a palindrome. You're going to use something called I think it's onChange is going to be your event handler for this one. And then finally, you have something called state abbreviator. So basically, I'm going to click on a particular drop down of state names, and then it's going to give me the abbreviation immediately. So again, this is all about very, very quick things. And today, yes, we're just doing dumb little toy things, but it's just to get you used to this React stuff, just to get started. Any questions on React?
Do we have to do the ESLint on all this stuff? Or no?
I think ESLint is built in, so they will actually tell you when something breaks. So it's like if you use something that if there's something wrong with your code, they will let you know immediately. I don't think it will run with it if there's issues.
Okay.